The small town of Mayville in the Appalachian Mountains had neither fame nor future. Here was born Ethan Morton, a boy with a heart full of dreams, but with hands hardened by hard work. His father worked in a coal mine, and his mother worked 2 jobs to make ends meet. As a child, Ethan wore the same shoes for several years in a row, and often dinner consisted of canned beans and bread. Since childhood, Ethan had a strange passion for mechanics. He disassembled old watches, broken toys, and once even repaired his grandfather's old chainsaw. He dreamed of one day creating something significant, not just a mechanism, but something that would change people's lives. But the road to this seemed endlessly long and gloomy. At school, Ethan was often underestimated. His math teacher bluntly said, "You're a good kid, Ethan, but big ideas aren't for us. Find a good job in a factory and stick with it." But he didn't give up. After school, when the others went out for walks, Ethan worked in the garage, fixing engines and taking online engineering courses on his mother's old laptop over slow internet that could barely handle YouTube. One day, while working on an old generator, Ethan accidentally invented an energy-efficient mechanism for reusing heat. He realized that it could reduce fuel consumption by 15%. He showed the drawings to a local professor who was in town for a conference. The professor was impressed and gave Ethan the most important gift of all, a contact from a professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. When Ethan received an invitation to interview at MIT, he cried. It was like a message from another world. He had to hitchhike to Boston because he didn't have money for a ticket. He slept in a hostel with cockroaches, in a room with no heat. He showed up for the interview wearing a suit that had once belonged to his grandfather. But he spoke from the heart. "I didn't get this from books. I got it from life. I know how an engine works because I cleaned it by hand. And I know how energy changes life because my mother never had enough." He was accepted. And he wasn't ready for what awaited him at Cambridge. His English was rough, his math skills were raw, and his social skills were foreign. But Ethan studied. Nights, days, and during lunch. He wasn't interested in parties or fancy gadgets. He wanted to prove to himself that he was worth the chance. Within 3 years, he was one of the top engineering students. His project, a system for autonomous energy for rural areas, received a grant of $150,000. But it was only the first victory in a long journey. Investors refused. "You're from Mayville? Oh, right. This is not for our fund." Then Ethan gathered a team of people like him, small-town boys and girls, former military personnel, first-generation college students. Together they created a startup called Ashlight, Light from Ashes. Ashlight began in a garage full of metal debris, old processors, and coffee stains. The team worked 16-hour days, and none of them had a steady salary. They ate pizza on credit and slept on the floor of an office that served as a laboratory, kitchen, and bedroom at the same time. Ethan developed a prototype of a power module that could provide electricity to a small house for 3 days without an external connection. But the system had a drawback: overheating. During one of the tests, the device exploded, causing a fire that destroyed most of the equipment. Insurance didn't cover the damage. They were on the verge of failure. Ethan stared at the charred circuit board and thought, maybe they were right after all. This isn't for people like me. But then an email came. One of the volunteers who was installing an early prototype of Ashlight in a village in Kenya wrote, "Your system saved a life. During a storm when the power went out, our medical center kept going. We were able to save insulin and save a child. Thank you." That was the point of no return. They started crowdfunding. The story of a small startup that saved lives in Africa raised $400,000 in 2 weeks. With the new funding, the Ashlight team moved to an incubator in San Francisco, where they had access to state-of-the-art equipment and mentorship from top Silicon Valley engineers. Despite his success, Ethan faced new challenges. A large energy consortium tried to stop Ashlight. There were threats of patent lawsuits, blocking of partner programs, even attempts to bribe team members. One investor bluntly said, "If you don't sell the technology, we will destroy you." Ethan refused. He wasn't building Ashlight to get rich. He was building it to change the world. And then help came from an unexpected ally, Elizabeth Moore, a well-known human rights activist and lawyer whose father once worked in the mine next to Ethan's father. She took on the legal defense of the startup for free. She said, "Your story is our story. And we will not let it be erased." Ashlight persevered. They won the first court case, received a federal grant to develop green energy, and launched a pilot program in 3 states, Kentucky, Mississippi, and New Mexico. The press talked about them. Ethan was invited to TED. His story, his struggle, and his refusal to sell out his dream became a symbol of the new America. After his TED Talk, Ethan began to be recognized. He was invited to the White House to discuss energy security. But the most important thing for him was a call from the principal of a school in Mayville. He was invited to speak to his students. When he entered a familiar classroom, everything had changed, and at the same time everything remained the same. The old blackboard, worn desks, the smell of dust. And yet, he stood before those who once were himself. "I am not better than you. I just did not give up. And I learned to see not only what is, but also what can be. Believe in yourself even when no one else believes in you." Ashlight began to expand across the United States, introducing its system to remote hospitals, schools, indigenous communities. Ethan initiated an internship program for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, the same ones he came from. He wanted Ashlight to be more than just a company, it had to be a movement. He turned down offers to sell the business for $1 billion. "Value is not measured in money, it's measured in impact," he said. 10 years later, Ashlight had become a global company, operating in 41 countries. The systems Ethan had developed had reduced fossil fuel consumption by hundreds of millions of tons. He was called the Lincoln of Energy for the 21st century. But Ethan remained simple. He still wore jeans and work boots, and every year he came to Mayville to meet with children at the local school. When his mother died, he turned her house into a learning center for local youth. It was filled with computers, 3D printers, batteries, and always fresh light. At the end of his life, he was asked, "What do you consider your greatest accomplishment?" Ethan answered without hesitation. That the children of Mayville now dream not of escape, but of change. And know that that change is in their hands. Ethan Morton's story is not just the American dream. It is proof that the ashes of the past can become the soil for the future. That strength is not in brilliance, but in resilience. And that even the darkest night ends with dawn, if you keep moving forward. The end. Subscribe.